Alright, I'm your host Miko, and I'll be talking to you about comparing two games I absolutely adore, Roblox Doors and Roblox Pressure. This video has a lot of firsts in it. It's my first video with the new mic I'm running right now, it's my first non-Gran Turismo 7 video, and it's also my first project that isn't completely solo. In this case, I have a co-host basically writing the entire script with me, Brandon. So why are we here to compare these two games? Well, first things first, they occupy the same genre and space on Roblox. In this case, the genre is rooms likes. And many people have tried to compare them, but I've looked at all those videos, most of them fall flat. They target useless aspects or just have a clear bias towards random details. Dude, difficulty is not a reason to commend a game. I don't understand how someone be like, oh, this game's better because it's harder. That does not make sense. Alright, so before we compare the two, let's give a quick history lesson. We'll go by release order. Made by Lightning Splash, or L Splash for short, Doors released in August of 2022 and very quickly became a hot topic in the Roblox community for its unique, easy to pick up, and yet complex gameplay. It really didn't even feel like a Roblox game, it felt like its own thing. Indoors, you play through a randomly generated hotel, mine, office, or garden, trying to survive the monsters ahead, with it drawing heavy inspiration from Spooky's Jump Scare Mansion and Nico Rock 555's Rooms. Being made by Zeal, and the dev team as a whole being referred to as Urban Shade Hadao Division, Pressure launched in July of 2024. While it didn't have the same generational launch that Doors did, it was still beloved by many fans in the rooms like genre, because it had a very unique spin on the genre. Instead of going for a more paranormal vibe, it went sci-fi, drawing a lot of inspiration from Ultra Kill, Iron Lung, and Doors, but also very importantly to the story, the SCP Foundation. How almost all the monsters and characters are represented through some sort of file, like the SCP universe. Because of these games having very similar origin, being both on Roblox, and occupying the same space on Roblox, their fan bases often try and compare the two games. However, to me, the fan bases mostly overlap each other. If someone likes Doors, they're most likely gonna like Pressure, and vice versa. But there's still some differences and still some adversity towards each game, and everyone likes to compare them. It's like Forza Motorsport versus Gran Turismo. Alright, now a history lesson on me and Brandon. Me personally, I played Doors close to when it first was, made as a game on Roblox all the while back, when it was simply just a hotel and a lot of the rooms were very unchanged. However, I would say I've spent more time on Pressure, probably hundreds of hours on it, and I, in general, would say I prefer it to Doors. However, Brandon's the opposite. Brandon is a little newer to both of these games, and he's put a lot more seat time on Doors. So hopefully our two biases can give a more fair view on the subject. Alright, finally, now let's get to the actual talking about how we're going to compare the two games. I have it separated into 4 sections. This is so that you guys can get a feel for what game each is good at. So, we have our 4 sections and each have subsections within that. That's how we're going to award the points based off of which game did better in that subsection. Our sections include presentation, core gameplay, replayability, and overall quality. We'll get into the subsections later. Whichever game has the most points to the end is considered the better game. But this is, again, up to opinion a lot. A game can't really be objectively better than another. I know many people don't consider this too important because they're always focused on graphics isn't that important. It's all about the core gameplay that matters. But to me, it does a lot more than you think. We're going to be talking about presentation. With that, our first subsection is UI and menus. Again, this seems quite small, but UI does play a big role in how a game feels. Whether it's Night Runner's interesting gauges that light up with the street lights below, or Cruelty Squad's iconic border around the screen. I would say that Doors has a very good UI. It has a very clean-cut look to it, while not looking like Microsoft Office. It has a very simple UI, with only small colors of brown and yellow. These colors match the environment a lot, especially since Doors has a very warm lighting scheme. And it also forgoes any information that is unnecessary and only displays stuff when it is needed. A good example of this is the health bar. It only shows up when you're hurting. And yet it doesn't have an exact number written on it or anything that makes it too complicated. It only tells you what you need to know. Same with the herbivorous and stuff. It just pops up in the corner of your screen and reminds you it's there. It doesn't need to do a lot. Pressure, on the other hand, has a far more grungy and gritty look to its UI. It's far more stylistic than simplistic. You'll actually notice the health bar is huge, taking up a big part of the left side of your screen. It often blocks a lot of the gameplay, and it uses various colors to display status effects, instead of what Doors does with the small icons. So it's kinda hard to understand what's going on, but usually context clues can help you out. While I would say I'm not a fan of how Pressure presents its inventory, I will say it does one thing right. It gives you the exact number of battery and charges you have in things. For example, the flash beacon actually has its ammo counter displayed, instead of it giving you a vague idea of how many uses you have left. I will say, Pressure does two pretty cool things when you get hurt. A, as your health gets lower, there's this red skull icon that appears within the health bar. It reminds me of a lot on how modern day Dodge Vipers, as you get closer to redline, have the snake logo appear. It also adds cracks to your mask as you get more hurt. However, these cracks are permanent, and I'll be honest, I despise the crack on the screen so much. It's cool at first, and it's cool when you get hurt. However, it stays on even after you heal. And let's say you get hurt, which is going to happen a lot in Pressure since it's a death by 1,000 cuts kind of game. You're going to have to be staring at that for the entirety of your run. So as you're closing off that final encounter, you're going to be staring at the stupid crack in the middle of your screen. Easily, this is a point for Doors. Honestly, more games should take notes from its design. It's clean cut, yet has just enough style in it to feel good. Our next subsection is graphics and visuals. I will say this is a lot more of a tough call between Doors and Pressure. Doors has a slight cartooniness in most of its design. There's very rarely a straight line. Most of the time, there's multiple angular lines kind of put together. It makes the art style feel almost hand-drawn. It often uses a lot of warm lighting to dominate its atmosphere. There is spots where you will see cooler lighting, but it's only around threats, which can be kind of interesting though, because it makes you realize that cool lighting means something's happening. Because of that style, I would say it's very cohesive looking. However, all the rooms are kind of alike. There's not much change you see in a run of Doors. Pressure is a far more cold, aggressive feel in comparison to Doors. Almost every surface in the facility is cold metal. I will say it's very industrial lighting, and almost everything has a slight blue tinge. The blue is only broken up by a very harsh red or an orange, which is still not the most comfortable color. The monsters too also look like deep sea creatures or failed science experiments. I mean, I gotta be honest, gotta give the point to Pressure here. This was a close call though. Doors has a very cohesive style, and I will say it has style. It has stuff going on like that. However, Doors feels like a haunted house in a Mario game. Yes, it does look nice, but it doesn't feel scary. In comparison, Pressure is scary with how it's designed. The last part we decided to compare when it comes to the presentation was sound design. While we initially had this separated into sound effects and OST, it gave way too much importance on sound related aspects and made presentation seem like it was on equal level with gameplay for our comparison. So we decided to merge them. The results still came out the same anyways. Doors kills it when it comes to sound design. Almost all the sound effects sound realistic and often fit the game's environment well. However, it does have a couple issues. The first thing I'd like to talk about is that it often repeats the same sound effects over and over, and that gets really annoying. Another thing too that adds to the annoyingness factor of the ambience is that they're loaded with red herrings. While some games do have red herrings in the ambience, and that does help with creating a good horror vibe, in this case, the ambience simply just misdirects you. It's not something you can learn to understand and be ready for. It just straight up lies to you. You think a monster is coming? It's not. I'm gonna play some audio here. You're gonna see what I mean. One of the most annoying pests you're gonna see throughout the game, Screech, has a very characteristic whisper whenever it attacks. It goes pfft. However, there's an ambient sound effect that is near identical to it. So the only way you're able to tell if it's real or fake is based off the distance away it sounds like. If it's close, it's probably real. If it's far away, it's probably fake. But who's gonna be listening for that? That's why I don't like the sound design. Another one of Doors' main enemies, Rush, has the same problem with red herrings. There are 2 bits of ambience that are near identical to the attacking sound he makes. In fact, one of them cuts off in a way as if to say, "Ha, gotcha." Dog, that's just rude. Why'd you do that to me? Instead of taking the more happy-go-lucky or just outright annoying approach, Pressure again goes for a more grounded and gritty feel with its sound design. You'll often hear other sounds that you'd expect to hear in the facility, such as the PA system going off, or just the sounds of turrets and other devices working. It also helps ground you in that feeling of being an expendable inmate. You won't be surprised to hear the sounds of other people dying in what feels like the next room over. I will say that these 2 games I feel like do best when it comes to their soundtracks. I mean, Doors alone has one of the greatest soundtracks that I've heard in gaming in a long time. It's an absolute earworm. It's super duper catchy. Many games just don't have that ability. If you start singing the elevator theme, a guy who knows Roblox will hum right along with you. You don't even need to play Doors. You're gonna know the elevator theme. Pressure's soundtrack is a little bit more of an acquired taste. While it isn't the outright jam and groove that Doors has, it has more angelic slow parts, yet when the intensity ramps up, it goes straight to breakcore, and damn does it do it good. I don't think words can do it justice. So, edit time, baby.
that, buddy? You're officially in the clear. Oh, we're all so proud of you.
I think you guys can assume which one won. Point for Pressure. Here is our biggest section. It's core gameplay. Our first subtopic is how fun a game is. It's the core reason you'd play a game. You wouldn't play a video game if you didn't enjoy it. So why would I try and judge these two games without including the enjoyment you get? This is basically going to be the smiles per gallon you get out of a game. While both these games have those super high points, I'm going to include the overall feeling that you have going through it. Like Doors has the rooms, and you wouldn't say that's fun. In fact, it's very repetitive. However, that high point at the end, I guess, gives you a lot of smiles. But as a whole, I'd say the experience is bad. So we're going to try and do it in that vein. We're only going to look at the smiles per gallon here. I would say that Doors is a pretty fun game. I mean, I played it a lot, so it has to be. But as you go through and analyze it, you can really see where that smiles per gallon shows up. Assuming we're starting from the very back, the back door has that race against time against haste. And yet as you go through, the seek chase is very fun. Encountering Halt, while sometimes infuriating, can also be extremely fun. However, there are some sections that feel more like chores than actual fun sections. For example, going up against Grumble or Figure gets really annoying really quickly. I will say though, Doors does have an issue when it comes to pacing its fun. It's often a lot of low points and then very high points. I would say the hardest lows are just when it comes to the regular rooms. There's not much special going on in them, there's not many threats that keep you on your toes. It kind of just gets boring really quickly. But then again, at the same time, that feeling of the fun section looming around the corner lets you pull through it a little better. And let's be honest, who cares about the regular rooms? Let's follow this the same way we did Doors. The Hunted Expedition is extremely fun in Pressure. However, the game does fall flat in some of its aspects in that expedition. I would say it's not fun when you have to constantly stare at the guardsman solo. However, getting your friends together and constantly communicating adds an extra layer of fun and complexity to it. In the main game, Pressure has that same high points and just overall degree of fun. The Abomination Chase is extremely interesting because you're constantly trying to adapt to the changing scenario around you. And the Jetsuit Evaluation course reminds me of Titanfall's Gauntlet. It's an extremely fun section where you get to use the advanced movement. Albeit it is a little clunky, but that's just Roblox jank for you. Pressure does fall into the same trap as Doors though. Its final bosses aren't that fun. The searchlights are the same as Figure in a way, where it's more a slow-paced slog through it rather than a fun high point. I will say though, the regular room experience of Pressure completely trumps Doors. Because there's so much variety and so many different and interesting threats, you're almost going to be constantly having fun shoved down your throat. Whether it's narrowly dodging and weaving through the turrets, or taking that slow-paced crawl, having your fingers crossed in the dredge. You even have the mantle section too, which has you constantly checking your oxygen levels. Remember, this is about smiles per gallon, so I would say that Pressure wins here. However, this isn't a landslide by any means. I would say it was pretty close. While Doors has a higher frequency of high points, the ability of Pressure to keep you in a fun state for longer makes it far more interesting. I can spend an hour on a Pressure run and still feel like I enjoyed it a lot more than I did a 45-minute run on Doors. What I'm trying to say here is, it's a point for Pressure. The next section up is Feel. Feel is very important to having an experience be enjoyable. Some very notable games like Hotline Miami and Titanfall 2 really drive home having good feel, and that lets the games be memorable and extremely enjoyable to play. Honestly, Doors feels great to play. There's a lot of smoothness in everything, and you're often not going to notice any hiccups, so it just feels right to play. However, there are some annoying things in it, especially when it comes to not being allowed to crouch or maybe accidentally getting stuck in an animation you didn't want to do. The feel indoors is very nice. I will say that Pressure feels pretty good to play. However, there's certain aspects that Doors just has it outright better in. I feel like the sound design when coupled with the actions is a lot better. How it's a strong kicking sound as you open the vents and as you flick switches. Pressure doesn't really have that. The sound design is far more gentle when doing actions, which makes the game feel gentler in some ways. The game also feels clunky in some places. The doors often load weirdly, and in the Jetsu course, the movement is extremely clunky. There are many situations where you'll get mad at yourself for somehow not catching a bar, or the jump just feeling wrong, or maybe a wall ride somehow showing up out of nowhere. The Abomination Chase is much of the same. You'll often find yourself hitting into stuff that you weren't planning on hitting. Let's put a point on the board for doors here. Our next section is variety. Variety is the spice of life, so it's important that these games have it. Starting off with doors, I would say it has a pretty good amount of variety. In a single run, you will see various rooms, and they do feel unique from each other. However, they often do follow the same theme or set. So as you're going through the mines, it's almost all mineshaft. However, there is that sewer section, which does make it feel a little different. And then as you go through the hotel, almost every single room in the hotel is the same. There might be an additional window or something that makes it special. However, again, it's still hotel, it's still mine. Doors has this really bad habit of just making you run from stuff. In the base game alone, you're gonna be running from Seek twice, and then you do it again twice in the mines. And then in the outdoors, you also run from things, and it's almost the same structure every time. However, there is little additions made to it. It's almost the same thing. You're following the guiding light, and there's something behind you. Pressure does pretty good in having some variety in its gameplay. The regular rooms do differentiate themselves from each other, simply because there's more rooms to generate. However, the little biomes that you're going to be seeing throughout a run do make it feel a lot more unique as you go through a run. There's also a far larger variety of threats that you're going to be going through in a singular run. So the variety is a lot more concentrated. However, in terms of the grand experience as a whole, technically it's less relative to doors, but you're able to access that variety all in one place. While technically speaking, doors has far more areas and technically an edge up in monster count relative to pressure, you're not going to be seeing most of these in the average run, unless you're an absolute G and are somehow doing the back door, hotel, mines, rooms, and outdoors in one run. But let's be honest, none of us are doing that. Again, an extremely tough win for pressure. I would say that both of these games can be better, you just have to ask the right person. Our next section is structure and pacing. A game can't be fun if it's paced horribly. If you're often dragging your feet just getting tasks done, it's not going to be an interesting experience. Same goes for these rooms-like games. If there's a lot of sections where it's slow-paced nonsense, you're not going to like it. I would say Doors has an okay pacing and structure. While there are sections that feel more like menial tasks rather than an actual game, I would say it's overall solid to play. And in the boring regular rooms, you can often blitz right through them. The pacing is also kind of kept in check because you have the constant threat of dread looming behind you. This gets especially apparent in the mines, where sometimes taking a room at a regular pace is too slow. Again, I would say that Pressure has okay pacing, but again, it's no, legend when it comes to being a well-paced experience. There's often sections in Pressure where they almost demand you to play it slower. When it comes to the Ridge, the only thing holding you back is your own caution. Same goes for a lot of the other rooms. They really want you to search and look for everything. Looking for a keycard in Pressure is extremely annoying, especially because the guiding light isn't as effective. Even in the Searchlights encounters, Sebastian outright tells you to take it slow. While games aren't bad when they are taken slowly, it needs to be somewhat interesting to do. Pressure doesn't really have that. That's a point on the board for Doors, and that closes off our core gameplay section. Our next section up is replayability. To me, this is extremely important for these kind of games. Because they're randomly generated, and the runs themselves are quite simple, the main way you're going to be getting fun out of these two games is trying to replay runs over and over again. So that's why I'm going to spend a lot of time analyzing the replayability of these two games. First up is run uniqueness. The ability for you to correlate and get memories out of a run and kind of see each run as an individual experience makes these games a lot more replayable. If all the runs mesh together, you're not going to really enjoy continuing to play more and more runs out of these games. I would say Doors does a pretty good job differentiating each run from each other. They often have rare monster encounters, rare rooms, and other aspects that make each run feel unique from each other. It does fall flat in some ways because the runs still follow the same structure, that door 50 is gonna have figure and the final encounter is always gonna be the same. However, that's kind of a necessary component of these rooms-like games. If there was zero structure to them, one run would be far easier than another. Pressure does a superb job at differentiating each of its runs. Because of the often different biomes that you'll be going through in the facility, each run already has a unique character. Also, the grand encounters are randomized to a high degree. You can either have the Abomination Chase or the Jet Suit, and the order of these events can be randomized too. Sometimes it's searchlights first, sometimes it's your chase scenes first. So these two factors allow the runs to feel far more unique from each other. However, the endgame structure is always the same. There is not any randomness it feels like there, and the randomness that is present is very minute. Because of the fact that Pressure makes each run identifiable and special, I'm gonna give it the point for this section. However, it's not a total landslide. Doors does do some things right by having some rare encounters. Jack and Sally are good examples of this. However, Pressure also has its fair share of rare rooms that make each run identifiable, and the documents also make that even better because you can remember those runs just by looking back at the document. Next section up is about alternative ways to play. While yes, these games obviously should be valued around their core gameplay, the stuff around it is what makes the experience often way better than others. I feel like Call of Duty is an amazing example of this. Zombies was a side mode, but it became so good, it's part of the core gameplay now. There are other situations like that, but to me, good side features and good side modes really help bolster a game. I would say that Doors' specialty is alternative ways to play. The rooms are an extremely fun experience, the back door is fun yet intense, and the outdoors is a complete flip on the genre, almost being open world in its structure. I love that about Doors. It has very good alternative ways to play. And we're not even done yet. The modifier system too. You can add additional modifiers onto the base game that greatly expand the experience. While sometimes they are annoying, it's an additional and alternative way to play. So even if you don't really like them, you can just turn them off. So if you want an easy run, you can have it. And if you want a harder run, you can have it. Some games don't give you that decision and that ability to choose, but Doors does, so I gotta hand it to him. Good job. I'm gonna be honest here, Pressure is not winning this one. I'm telling you this in advance, but I'm gonna try and, plead its case here. It's like a lawyer who has like a really bad client. Like they clearly are guilty, but legally they have to do something about it. That's what this is here. Whatever, side tangent. Pressure does really good at having some fun side modes. It is the Hunted Expedition, the Raveyard, and Operation Heartburn. Operation Heartburn's my personal favorite because it can honestly stand up on its own two legs as its own game. However, it currently doesn't have much going on. There's a really high degree of potential. But let's be honest, potential is not a good way to measure a game, and the Raveyard and the Hunted Expedition, they don't have potential. They're conceptually just bad. They're just not fun to play. Even Zeal kind of says it himself. He does not enjoy the Raveyard at all, and he says he's not touching it, and it's more just an abandon and rush thing. However, Pressure does have a pretty good endless mode, so I'm gonna give it that. However, there's no grand encounters, so it's just regular room after regular room. So it's more just an endurance test than it is an alternative way to play. It's obvious. It's a point for Doors. Alright, our next section up is updates. Updates are extremely important to making a game feel good and just be enjoyable, because if you have the same meal every day, it's gonna get stale eventually. If you listen to the same song every day, it's gonna get stale eventually. If you play the same game every day, it's gonna get stale eventually. So, updates are really important to making these games replayable. Doors updates, while they aren't very common, they are usually pretty good. They often are trying to add content to the game while not trying to take away as much. And personally, I really like that approach because often replacing and fine-tuning already existing content, while it can be nice if the balance is done correctly, it can often hurt the game because you'll lose out on content that you might have enjoyed previously. So I gotta give Doors some credit there with its updates. and most of the updates are pretty good and greatly enhance the experience. However, some do get annoying. I would say it's mostly upgrades across the board. Pressure and Doors have the same problem when it comes to its update schedule. Pressure often takes way too long to get updates out, so they're very few and far between. However, I would say that Pressure, like Doors, has pretty big updates. They're often core changes to the gameplay. While that does sound bad on paper, it often turns out pretty good as the core essence of most sections is still kept and the difficulty is still around the same. For me, a good example of this is the Searchlights encounters, where while the area has been changed, the core structure is still there. One last thing though, I'd like to have a moment of silence for the old OST of Pressure. You will be greatly missed. Thank you for honoring that moment of silence. The Pressure OST was great, changed my life, and I really think it deserves more respect. Search Party, that was my personal favorite. You will be missed. But Volume 2 is pretty good though, so I'm not gonna really rip on it too much. At first, I thought this section was actually gonna be a tie. I feel like Pressure and Doors both have pretty inconsistent updates, and yet they add the same amount of content, so I can't really knock either of them. However, I gotta give a point to Doors here. It has a more additive process, and even when Pressure decides to take that additive process, like Doors, it often flops. Those side modes just aren't as good as the core game by any means. However, it does have a trickle-down economics approach. It's not rare that you see a feature from an expedition that's on the side, often getting added to the main game. However, sometimes I don't always want that. I feel like the Candlebearers are a good example. They don't really fit the black site environment, and they're just kind of an annoying pest. We're at our final section now. This is where the games either win or lose. Our two heavyweight contestants are neck and neck right now, each at 5 points. We're gonna need to see which one comes out on top here, because we have 2 games and 3 points to spread. Good luck to each of our fighters. Next section up is attention to detail. Again, while this seems quite small and it's often something you're not gonna notice, it's those little things that make the game feel better. Doors has a pretty nice attention to detail. The little things around the game that just add stuff that makes the experience feel a lot better. My personal favorite example of this are the paintings. My favorite painting is Judgment. It's the 9+10 kid, and I find that hilarious. Another thing they like to do is give lore reasons for certain things. For example, the knocking ambience that you often find yourself hearing, they outright state it's El Goblino. In the shop, he'll tell you that he likes knocking around in the hotel to scare people, and it scares me, probably scared you too, so he got us laughing in the end. When it comes to attention to detail, very few games are on Pressure's level. I gotta give it a lot of credit for being chock full of references. Pressure honestly feels like a love letter to internet culture, featuring thousands of other games and just references to other funny moments and sometimes references to its own community and fan base. And that I really love. But that's not even the best part when it comes to its attention to detail. The documents and the lore on everything is insane. Every single monster has their own document, and even if they aren't a threat to you, they have their own document. So that amount of attention to detail is insane. I'm pretty sure the Pressure dev team actually has writers who exclusively work on documents and getting the lore to all fit together. It's not a storyline anymore, it's a universe. If my somewhat corny line didn't give it away, I gotta give the point here for Pressure. Next up is minor glitches. This is stuff that, while not game breaking or run ending, it's just stuff that kinda gets under your skin. While sometimes they are funny, they can also be quite annoying. Doors is pretty good when it comes to keeping the small glitches in check. The overall experience is smooth, and when there is a minor problem, it's extremely minor. It'll be something as small as Z fighting on 2 textures. There's never anything that gets in the way that's going to be a significant problem to your experience. Pressure's quality when it comes to bugs and small glitches can best be described as Bethesda-like. It is quite bad. I have a clip actually of 3 pretty bad yet minor bugs happening at the same time. Whatever I'm gonna do, I'm gonna clip this. Okay, let's look at the current state of Pressure. Just right here. Sebastian, big black wall. Radio,
I am able to tune it beyond outside the radio. Don't ask how that works. And the wall dweller that you're constantly hearing, stuck in place.
This is quite an easy point to give to doors. I don't have a clip of that capacity against it, so pretty obvious why it wins here. Kinda hurts to have this video end on such a negative note here, but our last and final topic is major glitches. Sometimes like small glitches are funny and you can laugh at them, but major glitches are just problems that make the game unplayable or unwinnable. These are stuff that significantly get away in the experience and are stuff that are worth reporting either out of rage or out of caring for the game. Again, much like minor glitches, Doors does pretty good at keeping everything in check here. I have had some small moments that do really rustle my feathers, grind my gears, and get my panties in a bunch, but it's overall not that bad. There is one time though when me and Brandon died to ambush, and there was just straight up not a sound cue, or there's many times where you'll die to rush with a friend, and it's for the same reason. You just didn't hear it coming, the lights didn't flicker, and you don't know why you died. Small things like that really get annoying very quickly. I would say that Pressure is not innocent when it comes to major glitches. It often has a lot of mistakes that slip through the cracks, often like impossible deaths to avoid. It's not rare for you to get stuck under the map when playing with a friend. However, in other scenarios, it's just impossible to win. For example, there was one time where there was a room that me and Brandon were in, and there was an invisible wall blocking the correct route, so we just had to die to succeed. The worst part about that was too, is that even after both of us used a ferryman token, we died a couple minutes later in that run. So yeah, I wasn't happy about that. I think the biggest issue is the detection when it comes to looking at something. While looking away from infestation works fine, the looking at something is a problem. For the guardsman and the wall dweller, sometimes they'll glitch out and you'll see them walk straight towards you when they should be stopped. I've had many runs end to wall dwellers just becoming invincible to sight for some reason. And I've also taken a lot of damage to guardsmen just outright ignoring me looking at them. They're cheating in their own game. I will tell you, in that commentary, I did kind of overplay the issue with Pressure and underplay the issue with Doors. In terms of the amount of deaths I've had, I would say that Doors might be more common, but Pressure has far more just annoying experiences with major glitches, and I've had friends who have far more worse experiences on Pressure in comparison to Doors. So I'm actually going to give it a tie point for this section. Really, dude? I didn't want this to be a conclusive tie. I wanted a winner in the end, and this is what I get? I tried to be as fair as I could be with the judging, and that's what I got here. They both are good. So do with that as you will. My personal opinion is Pressure, but you don't have to follow that. Wow, man. Basically 40 minutes spent talking about these games. I really hope you enjoyed it, as it's a little different from what I normally do. Honestly, I'm not always a car guy, so being able to talk about something a little childish like Roblox and something that, I absolutely love, which is horror games, is a pretty nice breath of fresh air. And I really hope you guys like the new mic. Bigger things are to come. I'm sorry this video took 2 months. Peace. Look at you, again, sticking around after the intro's over. Well, this isn't a blooper reel this time. I'm saving that for the membership, which you should get, by the way. I'm gonna give a little rant about the shopkeepers in these two games, because honestly, it's not talked about enough. Sebastian and Jeff. Doors Jeff is amazing, man. Like, yes, he's a crook. Obviously, like, you fill his tip jar, he just puts another out there. I mean, that's rude. and he's clearly, you know, taking stuff off of like corpses and previous failed runs. And he is pretty exorbitant with his prices, especially with El Goblino causing artificial scarcity. But for the most part, he's chill, you know? He doesn't hurt you in any way. Shine light in his eye, oh, he doesn't like it a little bit. But he has no beef against you. He just wants to survive and get his money up. He wants to go to college, bro. Let him. But Sebastian. Ooh, Sebastian. He's the absolute charmer of pressure and is the face of the game. Everyone loves him. He has that endearing smile, and his voice actor, Djani, very good. Honestly, I gotta hand it to the voice actor here. He's pretty good. And he's also a holdover from Ultra Kill, which really shows its inspiration. But dude, Sebastian's like, he's not a crook. He is a liar and a thief. You know how he says to Painter, oh, it's about survival. Yes, you're killing people, but it's for your own survival, and that's justified. Yet when I kill the Painter to justify through my survival, now it's not okay? Now it's not. I see how it is, Sebastian. And don't you get me started placing all them traps around and stuff. You know what you're doing, bro. Oh, I wonder who put that there. He's just spitting in your face. Oh, look. Yeah, I killed you there. Ah. And then he gives you that whole thing about, oh, you're evil for killing his buddy. No! You're bad. You're the problem. You're also greedy. You know the only reason he's nice to you is because we give him research, and that's more leverage he can use. If we serve no purpose, he would shoot us on the spot. Sebastian doesn't really care for us. He just uses us as leverage. Oh, you could say he helps you with the documents. He steals them too. He wants them also. And yes, he does explain what's being, you know, causing your death. But again, he's forced to. It's Mr. Low P wanting that. Sebastian's evil, bro. And you'll love him. If that doesn't say something about society, man. Ugh.